Yeah, hey now. Good morning, PSW staff, clients, friends. Joining us for Wednesday. We made it through Schoenberg. That was a tough one to do, but we needed to talk about atonal music because the significance of film music, in the 20th century, especially with Kubrick, but also Bernard Herrmann, composers that we've talked about, they use these elements of atonality in particularly horror, in the horror genre, and so so that's why. But he's important for a lot of other reasons. So I hope you enjoyed at least some of that. It's good to know the history about a lot of what we talk about is history, particularly music history. So we're going to talk about a guy that I did want to talk about 2 weeks ago. If you remember during the Ziegfeld class, Ziegfeld Follies, this was one of the songwriters that I wanted to talk about. He's one of the most important American theater composers of the 20th century. Very early on, too, wrote more than 700 songs, and almost all of them, maybe not all, but most of them were great songs. Used in over 100 stage works. We don't know this, a lot of us forget, especially me, the shows that were involved with these, but the songs live on. So we'll talk about why they live on and how they live on. So today we're going to talk about the great Jerome Kern.
Someday when I'm awfully low and the world is cold, I will feel a glow just thinking of and the way you look tonight. Oh, but you're lovely with your smile so warm and your cheeks so soft. There is nothing for me but to love you just the way.
So most of this music that we're going to hear throughout the class are from famous artists. So he's a songwriter. So we're not going to really be listening to any original recordings. Some of them are too old. So we're focusing on the melody and the song that lives on. So all the songs that we'll be hearing throughout the class are songs written by Jerome Kern. Nominated 8 times for an Academy Award and won twice. Also a lot of nominations for Best Original Song. So really successful in blending the European opera, light opera, operettas, with kind of the American style. So the American style goes back to Copland. We talked about how Copland, with the open prairie sounds, how he came up with that American sound somehow. Jerome Kern's going to incorporate some of that American style, although not using classical music, using the songbook, using original songs. How did he do that? I don't know. Let's talk about his life and maybe we'll find out. Okay, we were in Vienna for Schoenberg. That's where he was born. He died in Brentwood. But let's go to Sutton Place in New York. And Jerome Kern's born in 1885, so a long time ago. And let's bring up our timeline. We've done classes on George Gershwin, Cole Porter, Richard Rodgers. We did Oklahoma, and we've talked a lot about Richard Rodgers. But Jerome Kern's the earliest, if you look at the timeline. He's a little bit before all these guys. So, 1885 is, really early. If we're thinking of, songs that are still covered today. There's too many songs that are covered by this gentleman. Probably some of his most famous. Old Man River. Everyone knows that song. Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. That was covered even by, the Platters. All the Things You Are, which is probably, maybe one of his best. The Way You Look Tonight. I'm Old Fashioned. Those are just some of his songs. And those songs are covered, like I said, even today. If you go to a jazz concert, someone's going to play one Jerome Kern song at least. So he doesn't write the lyrics. Cole Porter's going on a little bit later. Cole Porter's interesting because remember we talked about he did write the music and lyrics. George Gershwin's using his brother to write the lyrics. Richard Rodgers uses Lawrence Hart, but also Oscar Hammerstein. But Jerome Kern's going to be using Oscar Hammerstein before they team up. So Jerome Kern, Jewish immigrants, born in New York to Jewish immigrants, but taught to play the piano and organ by his mom. It's interesting. I always want to find who gave them the first music lesson. In a lot of these classes, it's usually the mother, probably because the father was at work. Not that the father didn't care, but I would think that mostly it's probably because, you know, the man of the house usually traditionally is working. So a lot. It's kind of cool that a lot of this music comes from the mother teaching them. And then he wrote songs really at an early age for the school's first musical. And would write a lot, and left high school before graduating in the spring of his senior year in 1902. And so in 1903 he goes to Germany to study privately, to study with classical musicians, before coming back to Broadway when Tin Pan Alley, Ziegfeld Follies is going on. So he studies at New York College of Music, studying piano, studying theory, studying composition, gets a really good classical music education. When he comes back to New York, he works as a rehearsal pianist. That's a really hard job, and you got to be a really good piano player, so he must have been a great piano player. And starts working at Tin Pan Alley for music publishers. We talked about George M. Cohen, Gershwin. You know, this was just a song factory where you would just plug your songs. His first score for Broadway was The Red Petticoat, and that's in 1912. Like I said, a lot of these shows aren't really remembered, but the music, are, you know, the characters and the plot sometimes are not as remembered as much as the songs live on. So just, you know, I'll point that out. So he's writing musicals at a really early age. So for 1912 to come out, 1915 he was supposed to sail with his friend Charles Frohman from New York to London, but this was on the RMS Lusitania, and that's the boat, the British ocean liner that sank in 1915 by a German U-boat off the coast. It killed about close to 1,200 people. And Kern was supposed to be on that boat, but was playing poker the night before and overslept. I mean, it's terrible that those people died, of course, but think if he would have made that voyage, we wouldn't have had all these great songs. Just interesting to think about that. So after in New York, writing Broadway, writing shows, and writing for the Ziegfeld Follies. We talked about Florenz Ziegfeld and how he'd have a company of the Ziegfeld, you know, the showgirls, and just how he would do. There were more musical reviews. They weren't shows yet. It was more like constant entertainment rather than developed operas or developed musicals. That's going to come with a little bit more with Jerome Kern. So, like I said, they were before they were kind of really the plots and characters were really thinly like written. I mean, on purpose. Like I said, a lot of these immigrants in New York and people coming, they wanted entertainment. They were busy working. They didn't have time to sit through a 3-hour Wagner opera. I mean, so a lot of this was instant entertainment, which is good, but it can also be. You know, sometimes people want something a little bit more elevated, and so what they were doing, they were inserting their songs in the lyrics and their songs into these things to help, you know, make the characters and the plot more exciting. And a lot of what Jerome Kern followed was the work of Gilbert and Sullivan, who we talked about a few weeks ago, with their light opera and how they wrote in a very sophisticated, witty style. So he learned that in Europe, so he's gonna use that for Broadway. So this technique features the modern American musical. This is what he's starting to do in the 1920s. And the 20s were a really productive time for musical theater and Jerome Kern. I mean, he created at least one show every year for that entire decade. Showboat's probably his most famous and well-known musical that's still on today. That's probably, you know, mostly you can still find the other shows. I don't think they're ever performed, but that was a big story because it dealt with racism and alcoholism and marital status and people that wanted to go to the theater and musicals to escape. You didn't do those kind of things, but so he wanted to find deeper stories too. And Ziegfeld let him do it. So 1935 musical, you know, now people like Busby Berkeley are going to be doing musical films, really, you know. So like, you know, instead of now that things aren't on the stage, now we're filming more, and now that sound's there, we're able to kind of do, you know, film musicals. So that's thanks to Busby Berkeley. he does go to Hollywood and writes a lot of film scores as well, including Swing Time in 1936, and that's when the big song, The Way You Look Tonight, comes out. That won the Academy Award in 1936 for Best Song. Still performed. Maybe the best... What do you think the best version of that song is? It might be this one.
Someday, when I'm awfully low, when the world is cold, I will feel a glow just thinking of you in the way you look tonight. Yes, your love.
Frank's interpretation is great, of course. The arrangements are so good, but you wouldn't have that without the melody. It's kind of like baseball. The pitcher needs to be good. The pitcher is like the melody. If you have somebody that can't pitch, you can have the best fielders in the world, but you need that great melody, and then you can have the best fielders. You can have the best musicians, the best arrangements, all these things fit into place. But without pitching, without melody, I don't know if it's going to work sometimes. This is subjective, sorry, but I got no one else to talk to in this room.
With each word, your tenderness grows, tearing my fear apart, and that laugh wrinkles your nose, touches my foolish heart.
So in 1945, at the age 60, he dies. So pretty young, cerebral hemorrhage, just walking on the Park Avenue and 57th Street, right in New York. So born in New York, dies in New York. Some of the music critics and people were talking about how he got people to dance again in 4/4 time signature. Who was the king of the waltz, the 3/4 people? Johann Strauss II, right? Remember, he did that scandalous thing in the 19th century with the Blue Danube, and he got people to hold your partner closer, which was very forbidden, and to 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Well, Jerome Kern's going to get people to dance, but it's hard to, but because of jazz and big band and swing music coming in, you get waltzes, but not really. It's more 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how you swing it. So that's 4/4 time. So Jerome Kern's going to be saying, well, we can get people to dance like the waltz, 50, 60 years before that. We can get them to dance in 4/4 time with the foxtrot. The foxtrot's kind of a smooth dance characterized by kind of long dance movements usually with a big band behind it. But the rhythm is 4/4 instead of 3/4. So you can swing a 3/4 song, but I don't know. Sometimes, really, you got to swing it in 2/4 or 4/4. So these great songs came out of ragtime, Scott Joplin we talk about, and syncopation, but also Gilbert and Sullivan. So he's using ragtime and light opera to create his melodies, and also more sophisticated chords, more chords, jazz-like chords, minor 7 chords, not just minor, but now he's adding the 7th to it. Now he's adding the 9th to certain chords. The Gershwin and other songwriters are doing this as well, but he's one of the first to expand chord progressions, and I think that's why people like Bill Evans, Charlie Parker, they would all cover Jerome Kern songs because it had a good melody, but it was also not just, it wasn't too corny or square. They were really good, emotionally developed, emotionally satisfying songs. So that's just a taste of Jerome Kern. Hope you liked it. Really great songwriter. Elevated the sophistication of the Broadway musical and linked that European flavor to early ragtime, to the musical American songbook theater, the American sound. So I always like to just figure out where these influences come from with all these artists and how, and we're just figuring it out together. So, okay, hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.